it's so hard to believe you've been loving another.
Over the past 20 years, Little Brother has been one of the most reliable acts in the underground. The group dropped 2 underground classics in their original run as a trio with Ninth Wonder, and since becoming a duo, rappers Phonte and Big Pooh have taught the world a masterclass on aging gracefully in hip-hop. Little Brother was one of the first rap acts to make it through the internet, paving the way for a whole new generation of artists. They may not always get the credit they deserve, but they set the gold standard for many aspects of hip-hop that came after them. Even Drake has called Phonte one of his biggest inspirations musically. Phonte's blending of singing and elite rapping, combined with Pooh's mastery of real-life raps, makes for one of the greatest 1-2 punches in hip-hop history. Their story starts back in 1998, when Phonte, Big Pooh, and Ninth Wonder were students at North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina. The trio bonded over their love of hip-hop and formed the group Little Brother. That name was just chosen because they liked the sound of it, but it fits perfectly, as the group can be seen as sort of the little brother of groups like A Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul of the Native Tongues. They actually were a part of their own Native Tongues-esque collective, as founding members of the North Carolina-based Justice League, along with artists like Chaundon, Legacy, Median, and more. The Justice League were some of the leaders of that new generation of underground artists, essentially becoming the founding fathers of the burgeoning blog era. Nowadays, the world of hip-hop is connected through the internet, with aspiring artists and hip-hop legends alike, all interacting on Twitter and making the world of hip-hop a lot smaller. But before Little Brother, this was unheard of. As a group from North Carolina, there wasn't really a hub like New York or LA around for the artists to flock to, so they turned to the interweb to make connections. The group would post most of their music on hip-hop message boards, and they eventually caught the ear of a small record company out west, ABB Records. In 2003, Little Brother released their debut album, The Listening. The trio came out of the gate creating timeless art. They each brought their own style to the group, while all fitting together like a 3-piece puzzle of perfection. Ninth Wonder was the sound architect, providing them with that golden soul sound that they became known for. And while you may not hear their names brought up on most GOAT lists, Phonte and Big Pooh are 2 of the best and most consistent rappers to ever do it. Their styles are similar enough to feel cohesion, while different enough to separate themselves as 2 distinct parts of the Little Brother formula. Phonte has described himself as the chisel and Pooh as the sledgehammer, both breaking down the stone of each song, but each with their own way of doing it. This album is the blueprint for every Little Brother album that came after it, and it immediately set the group up for a number of opportunities, getting the call from West Coast icons Hieroglyphics to go on tour, and Jay-Z even hitting up Ninth Wonder to produce for the Black Album. From here, the group was set up to become one of the definitive underground acts of the aughts. They continued their run into 2005 with the release of their first officially distributed mixtape, Chitlin Circuit 1.5. This tape feels like an extension of The Listening, both in its lyrical themes and sonic style. This is easily one of my favorite mixtapes of this era, and even features a song with college dropout era Kanye West. Their second album leveled up everything they did on their debut. The Minstrel Show was released in September of 2005, and is the crowning achievement of the trio. The Listening had radio skits playing throughout the album, but the Minstrel Show takes that concept and triples down on it, making a concept record focusing on the minstrel shows of yesteryear. For those who don't know, minstrel shows were performances in the 19th and early 20th century, where white performers would perform in blackface makeup, playing up stereotypes of black people of the time. On this album, Little Brother compares these minstrel shows to modern-day rap and the music industry at large. Phonte and rapper Big Pooh had socially conscious lyrics mixed into their lifestyle bars in The Listening, but here they take it to the next level, all over what may be the finest production of Ninth Wonder's career. This album has many of my favorite Little Brother songs, and officially introduced many characters of the LB universe, including Roy Lee, Percy Miracles, and Chris Hardwick as the host of the show. While they're now known as independent icons, the group actually released this album under Atlantic Records. It's honestly shocking that Atlantic let them put this album out uncompromised, considering the history of major labels stifling the artistry of hip-hop acts. But this is one of the few positive stories that ended up giving us a classic. The group began recording their follow-up to The Minstrel Show in late 2006, but in January of 2007, they announced that Ninth Wonder would be leaving the group. A lot has been said over the years about their breakup, but to keep it brief, you can just chalk it up to creative differences and a case of artists growing apart. The end of his little brother tenure was not the end of the Ninth Wonder story, however. By this point he had already begun an incredible partnership with Merce, and he's gone on to start his own label and work with many of the biggest artists in hip-hop. He also has become one of the biggest ambassadors for hip-hop, even becoming a hip-hop professor at North Carolina Central, Long Island University, and Duke University. But back to Little Brother, Ninth Wonder did end up having one beat on the group's third album. The Get Back was released in October of 2007 and featured production from Ninth along with Illmind, Crisis, High Tech, Zoe, Mr. Porter, Knots, and Rashid Hadi. The Get Back signified not only the group's separation from Ninth, but also their departure from Atlantic Records. Without the major label budget and push, this album has a bit of a smaller sound, and they did manage to secure a verse from Lil Wayne, who had been a longtime fan of the group. For this album, the group was still under that small label they originally signed under, ABB. But after that, they were determined to become fully independent and own 100% of their music. In 2008, they released a mixtape titled And Justice for All with DJ Mick Boogie, which leads us into 2010's Left Back, which acts as a sequel to Get Back and closes the second chapter of Little Brother. Left Back, just like its predecessor, is a super dope project with elite rapping from start to finish and great production throughout. But for both of these albums, you could tell that the magic from the first two records wasn't quite there. In April of 2010, the group officially announced their breakup. It wasn't necessarily surprising, but still disappointing. At the time, Phonte stated, "If you're doing business with a friend, you gotta decide, well, do I end this business relationship and keep my friendship, or do I continue this business relationship and end up wrecking both?" This may seem like a sad ending, but this is only the ending to a chapter, and not to the Little Brother story overall. Before I get to their grand reunion, I want to take a minute to discuss their solo careers. Rapper Big Pooh and Phonte have become two of the most reliable MCs in the underground, whether they're with LB or not. Rapper Big Pooh dipped his toe into the solo waters back in 2005 with his album Sleepers. This album feels like a bonus from the golden era of Little Brother, with a feature from Phonte and some production from Ninth Wonder. But Big Pooh really set himself apart from the group here at the same time. He's ended up releasing over a dozen solo projects, with his best work in my opinion being 2015's Words Paint Pictures with Apollo Brown. Phonte is interesting because not only does he have a great solo career, but he's also a part of another group that's a huge part of his legacy. Phonte met Dutch producer Nicolay on an OKPlayer.com message board, and they formed the group Foreign Exchange. The group has released 5 albums over the years, and their sound perfectly complements Phonte's wide skill set, leaning into the more neo-soul side of things and letting him sing more while still showcasing his rap from time to time. Speaking of singing, he also teamed up with the producer Zoe to form the group Zoe and Tigolo, and give us an album filled with cover versions of 80s songs on their album Love the 80s. When I had a radio show in college, their versions of Africa and Take On Me were always in rotation for me to play. On the solo side of things, Phonte also released Charity Starts at Home in 2011, Tigolero with Eric Robertson, and No News is Good News in 2018, but more on that one in a little bit. In 2016, the world of hip-hop was in mourning after hearing about the passing of Phife Dawg from A Tribe Called Quest. Phife was in a similar situation to the Little Brother MCs. Him and Q-Tip were best friends who made incredible music together, but they grew apart over the years and ended up not being on good terms for much of the last years of Phife's life. At this time, Phonte and Big Pooh had not spoken to each other in over 5 years, but with Phife's passing, it inspired Pooh to reach out. He sent a text to Phonte, who returned it with a phone call, and soon the old friends were back together like the good old days, except now with the added maturity that time gets you, allowing their partnership to be better than before. In 2018, the group reunited in full, along with Ninth Wonder, at the Art of Cool Festival in North Carolina. That was the trio's first time performing together in over a decade, and they said it was an incredible experience getting back on stage together. So much so that they began recording a new album in secret. Ninth Wonder was originally set to be a part of this album, but left once again due to creative differences. But Phonte and Big Pooh were ready to give Little Brother one last true closing chapter, one that would become the album of their careers, complete with complete cohesion between the two MCs. May the Lord Watch was released in August of 2019, and picks up right where LB left off a decade prior. Phonte's most recent album, No News is Good News, was made in a year where he lost a lot of people close to him. He described that album as a meditation on death and mourning, but May the Lord Watch is a response to that, being a celebration of life. This album has some of the best songs of the group's career, and continues the thematic run of their early albums with UBN interludes and updates on many of the characters that they introduced on those earlier projects. This album is the definition of grown man rap, not rapping about partying and turning up, but rapping about life and making the best out of where we are. Little Brother makes music that every human can relate to, and this album is them at their most thoughtful and relatable. They have left the door open for more Little Brother albums in the future, and I really hope that they come through with that, because they're proof that you're able to age gracefully in hip-hop. And when they do release more music, you can guarantee that we'll still be listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. First off, I just want to announce that we recently dropped the first issue of Def magazine. Me and a bunch of really talented writers and artists all collaborated to make this really cool issue for you guys. I was able to interview Fatboy Sharif, and there's so many dope pieces in there, so make sure you guys go check that out. There's digital and physical copies available over on my website, staydef.com. Thank you so much for watching this video. This topic was voted on by our patrons, so a special shout out to you guys as always. If you want to vote on next month's topic, make sure you go check out the Patreon. If you become a patron, you also get a free digital copy of the magazine, so if you're interested at all, then go check that out. I want to thank you all so much for the support so far this year. I know my release schedule's been a little slow, but I got a lot of great stuff planned, so stay tuned, stay safe, and stay def. Thanks for watching.